Greetings, Dragon Ball fans, and welcome to part 7 of What If Goku Kept His Tail, where we follow Goku and friends after he decided to both keep his tail and, more importantly, master that which the tail grants him, the mighty, if somewhat temperamental, Ozaru. In the last part, Vegeta's needless showboating allowed 17 and 18 to escape, and with no one else to satisfy his desires for combat, he turned to the thorn in his pride, Kakarot, and gave him a week to prepare before they settled their grudge once and for all. The rest of the Z-Fighters then went off to chase down the androids, and with the help of Dr. Bulma rebuilding the remotes, and upgrading them, they were finally able to track them down. While following a blip on his remote's handy built-in sensor, Raditz encountered one ex-Colonel Violet. While by her own accounts she had long since cut ties with the ribbon, it seems Dr. Gero had remained unaware of her final act of treachery. I mean, was anyone really aware of it, other than Kid Goku? It's not like he would have bothered telling anyone about the money anyway, right? At their final port of call, Jingle Village, the androids came up on the wrong side of an apparently upgraded Aeter, while seeking, or demanding rather, aid from Gero's unwilling partner in cybernetic crimes against sentient life, and Aeter's own creator, friend, and resident mechanic, Dr. Flap. Piccolo pressed the button, and the pair were stripped of their kill directives by Drs. Bulma and Flap, and now the two re-engineered siblings must make their own way in life, making their own choices and their own mistakes. No, I'm not calling Krillin a mistake, despite any vaguely inappropriate differences in physical and or emotional maturities. Stuck for options against Vegeta, Goku is then invited by Dende to test drive some of the tweaks he's made to that old room of spirit and time. Of course his older brother Raditz goes too, as does Piccolo, who does not look forward to being left further behind. Unfortunately, there is no reason for Gohan to go in with them, as the boy already has his hands on Super Saiyan, and there is no Cell in sight, nor will there be for almost 20 years. The trio exit the time chamber midway through the next day. It's not been a full 24 hours, as there simply wasn't time, and unlike the Cell arc, instead of the mastered Super Saiyan, the pair are apparently still in their base forms. With nearly a year's worth of wrangling with the pair, Piccolo for one has had pretty good results. It's not exactly raw power, though. There's a calmness about his ki that extends to both Raditz and Goku. Kami and Dende, however, are unsure of exactly what they're sensing from this fusion. He is not yet that supposed Super Namekian, since Kami is standing right there, but there is something very different about him, and his former rival. When they arrive at the designated spot in the wastelands, Raditz and Piccolo both take a perch nearby and lean back to watch as Goku squares off against Vegeta, in his spiffy new threads, courtesy of Piccolo. Prince Vegeta has, of course, been waiting for this moment for years. He finally gets to pull out that annoying thorn in his pride, and he begins quickly enough by mocking Kakarot's apparent regression in power. Those androids must have broken him so thoroughly he's still in recovery, despite those damned beans. When this fails to get a rise out of his opponent, Vegeta charges in to strike, but hits nothing. He tries again and again, but it quickly becomes apparent that something is very wrong, and the prince is having flashbacks to being in the Frieza Force, relying on scouters and getting readings that just don't mesh with what's before him. Kakarot feels so weak, yet he's not just matching Vegeta blow for blow, he's avoiding most of them completely. Finally, on yet another missed strike, as they pass, they lock eyes for a moment. Why hadn't he noticed that earlier? Kakarot's been in that Ikari state the entire time. When Vegeta does the usual tense and strain, and maybe even the requisite roar, while immersing himself in the feeling of the Ozaru, Goku barely registers the change. Maybe he has to block a few more hits than before, but it's still just not right. Vegeta stops for a moment, relaxes, dropping Ikari, and then switching over to Super Saiyan, then immediately stacks Ikari back on top. The hell is this, he thinks. That damned Kakarot is again barely reacting. As they continue to bounce off of each other, Vegeta's frustration continues to climb. Kakarot has yet to switch to Super Saiyan, and the prince can't help but feel like those oddly sparkling eyes are mocking him. Even with a post-android beatdown Zenkai, if he had had this much on tap, how had those two even left a mark on the guy? They must have hurt him way more than it appeared. Right now, though, Vegeta's only concern is getting more power. He desperately needs to land at least one good hit on Kakarot. While he generally avoids thinking about what we all call the Saiyan Saga, Vegeta does remember what that half-breed had done, And then again in the training room, Kakarot had somehow done something similar when the prince had broken the gravity generator went bonkers for some reason. He had tried that for himself a few times, but it was very reminiscent of what little Ozaru training he had done as a child. He had felt his mind rapidly dissolving into madness. The exact same thing would happen when he tried to switch from Ikari straight to Super Saiyan. All reason and logic, and worst of all, his pride, had started slipping through his fingers, so he had stopped trying that. He was sure he had sensed Raditz and Kakarot doing similar things throughout the years, and was so relieved when their energies would fade as they obviously ran headfirst into the exact same problem. But that's all beside the point. In the here and now, he is grasping for any straw or rope or ledge that he can. Kakarot is making a fool of him. That no one save these four are here to see it, Vegeta does not care. He feels like he's being made a fool of, and his pride is being kicked and spat on with each missed or deflected strike. No! This was supposed to be a carefully crafted deconstruction of the ultimate affront to his high-class Royal Saiyan pride. But Kakarot is casually defending against him, all while still in just Ikari. It just doesn't make sense. How had those two mechanical toothpicks been able to beat him so badly that he got this level of Zenkai? When the first wisps of green-hued energy whip around Vegeta, Goku is forced to admit to himself that this was probably not the best course of action. He'd only been trying to tease out all of Vegeta's power, to make him push himself further. He just wanted to see what the guy had figured out, and to have a good fight, of course. But Vegeta wasn't here to fight. He was here to win, maybe even to kill, if need be. The bloodlust was clear in his scream as his pupils began to fade in and out. Goku calls out to Vegeta to stop, that he's going about it all wrong, but the man isn't listening. He's busy losing himself to that mindless rage. And now that he needs it, Goku doesn't have the chance to show Vegeta just what they'd found in that white void. No chance at all, as the massively bulked up and thoroughly overpowered Vegeta comes down to strike at him with speed that was balanced only by an utter lack of technique. There is none of the slowness found in the traditional grade 2 or 3 Super Saiyan. There is nothing but the mindless fury of an untrained Ozaru wailing at its current target. When Goku finds a moment's reprieve under a rock pile, he tries to pull on that new thread, but it's interrupted by Vegeta slamming into and through the boulders as if they weren't even there. When he is then thrown over a nearby horizon, Vegeta's blank gaze finally has a moment to fall on the other two present. Raditz, however, had had plenty of time to watch, and more importantly prepare himself. His brother may be a genius at fighting, but he just doesn't know how Vegeta ticks. Raditz, meanwhile, has had decades to study the man, and could see it all unfolding. Piccolo steps back as Raditz, also already in Ikari, pulls on that new thread they'd found. As Vegeta's hand comes crashing down, there is a flash of gold and a flicker of red as Raditz blocks the blow. He then wraps his hand around the striking wrist and flings his ex-boss back up into the air. We can cue the usual Too Fast to See fighting montage here for a bit as they clash while we wait for Goku to eventually recover from his unexpected ejection from the fight, and requisite bouncing halfway over a continent. He finally returns and lands next to Piccolo in that new, fully realized state that is obviously just lifted straight out of GT. Going Super Saiyan while in Ozaru gave you the Golden Ape, which then condensed down into the so-called Super Saiyan 4. Here, though, the Ikari state is equivalent to that great ape, and going Super Saiyan while in Ikari, if you manage to hold on to your sanity, ultimately grants the same endpoint. In the time chamber, Raditz had tried to explain to him why Vegeta would likely struggle with it. He had never had to fight tooth and nail to control his Ozaru. That precious royal blood of his had afforded him full control in only a few practice sessions. But those Saiyans of the lower classes, like Raditz as a younger man, had, just as Goku had, struggled for months on end to gain control of that form, something that had come to their aid after they had perfected the Ikari form and then gently poked at what lay beyond, with Piccolo there to guide the copious amounts of meditation. This is no time for exposition, though, as the two in the air are not being particularly gentle with each other. The ground Goku is standing on is rumbling and shifting even when there are no shockwaves to disturb it. They need to end this soon, or the Saiyans might again find themselves minus a planet. Seeing his brother is ready to join the fight, Raditz draws Vegeta away. The prince doesn't see the hit coming, and wakes up sometime later in his crater to see that everyone else has up and left. He's alone in his bowl of dirt, with nothing but shredded battle armor and the wind to speak to him of his failures. There is no body, no scraps of clothing, nothing but his utter confusion over Kakarot's inexplicable surge in power. How had he won? How had he overcome that world-breaking berserker that Vegeta had consciously, willingly given himself over to? After a while of just sitting there, staring at the ground, he finally remembers that his only real source of comfort is back at Capsule Corp, looking after the boy. This being the alternate timeline, ticking along sans future Trunks, there is of course no future Cell to be seen. He won't even hatch for 17 years, was it? So Hercule Satan does not get to apply his 24th World Martial Arts Tournament winnings further with the defeat of that bug man. Instead, he is just the one-time champion. His ego remains on show for anyone interested, but his daughter gets to live her life outside of his otherwise overgrown shadow. Videl still ends up at Orange Star High School, but given her upbringing, does she still take to the streets of the still-named Orange City to fight crime? It's not expected of her, so much so that she doesn't do it. At least, not publicly. She instead wears a disguise. When out and about thwarting violent criminals, she dons the flowing robes of Macaria. If you're wondering about the name, it's a daughter of Hercules, and as close an approximation to Videl's mother as I could scrape together. When Gohan joins Orange Star High School as well, on his way there for his first day, he still catches sight of the flowing cape and spinning high kicks of the city's resident crime buster busting some crime. Seeing her rather obvious disguise, but not having one of his own, he opts to remain in the shadows, and only once when a bullet is heading the heroine's way does he zip past, catching it in a gust of wind and a school uniform-colored blur. After watching things get wrapped up, he rushes off to his first day at school. Videl is of course late, as she often is, and unlike Gohan, who arrived on time, she gets in trouble for it, yet again. Of course he knows it's her the instant she walks into the classroom, and has to start spouting one well-practiced excuse after another to the irritated teacher. It's hard to hide from someone who can sense your very life energy after all, isn't it? After a few more such events, because Orange City is some sort of lawless Gotham City ripoff, with roaming criminal gangs and whatnot, Gohan decides that his luck will eventually run out, so a disguise is needed as well. He had of course also been worried for a while now about how the other students would react to his tail, so had decided to conceal it as best he can, and he keeps it wrapped tightly around his waist. He will also have to avoid all sporting clubs and activities to limit the possible exposure. The math and chess groups are much more his style anyway. All that thinking and strategizing, Chi-Chi, for one, approves. The Great Saiyaman is stillborn, however, because he finds he really rather enjoys the whole crime-fighting thing, but with the flamboyant Ginyu Force barely a footnote in his memories, there is a distinct lack of theatrics. Videl does notice his increasing intervention, with those vanishing bullets and the occasional mysteriously incapacitated criminals, but he keeps up the speedster shtick, and there is barely a trace of him to be found. Even after the local news invest in some high-speed cameras, all they manage to capture is what looks vaguely like one of those weird test drone things that exploded over West City back when Capsule Corp was testing their first spaceship. What, like 10 years ago now? Everything goes smoothly until that bus incident. When he catches it, Gohan has to remain still, relatively speaking, which gives Videl an eyeful of the helmeted, Saiyan battle-armored, and tailed superhero. Looking up, Gohan can, in turn, see Videl's face pressed up against the windscreen where she had fallen as he caught the falling bus. Her wig and mask have been knocked off by the impact. So as Videl finally lays eyes on this mysterious Saiyaman person's goofy grin, we will bring Part 7 to a close. Vegeta has once again found himself on the losing end of his self-proclaimed grudge against Kakarot. But how will it have affected him over these interleaving years? The last thing he remembered from that fight was willing himself into that berserker form, divesting himself of any and all inhibitions, only to return to consciousness alone and defeated by that low-class runt yet again. How do you think he will approach the upcoming 25th World Martial Arts Tournament? Will Babidi show up on time without Cell and Gohan's massive energy beams careening off into the cosmos as beacons? Will Gohan and Videl find some common ground, or will he keep his interest and possibly budgeting crush a secret? Find out next time on Dragonball, What If Goku Kept His Tail?